Welcome to the Point of No Return podcast, an exploration of strategy, leadership, technology, and entrepreneurship. Your host, Nectar, is the co-founder and partner at the PNR, a strategy consulting firm based in Montreal.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Point of No Return podcast, a show where we interview industry leaders, presidents, and CEOs to better understand how they think about strategy. On today's show, I caught up with an old friend, Naomi Goldapple, head of Alayalabs. Naomi moved over to Alayacare from Element AI. She was one of the first employees. I think she was like employee number 6. I still remember meeting her at Notman House back in the early days, and I've known her from her days at Mixology, actually, where she worked before. And so Naomi's been a industry veteran, has been around the block, so to speak. So I was really happy that she took the time out of her busy schedule, and despite the global pandemic and lockdown, to catch up and talk about what she's doing at Alayacare. Alayacare, for those of you that don't know, is really a bleeding edge company right now on the forefront of AI and home care. And we really get into their mission, what they're doing, and the absolute stellar growth that they've seen over the past few years. Naomi, a little bit of background. She's a passionate entrepreneur. She's an investor. She's been working in the tech space for a while. So we got into how she just got her start in the tech startup scene, and then basically worked her way up. We spoke about some of the insights that she learned along the way, notably about not just technology, but really the importance of tech in a business model, which I think is a pretty good insight considering today's environment. We spoke about how Alayacare is handling the crisis, and how really they are positioned to take advantage of this. If you think of what they're offering and the importance of it with an aging population, the importance of digital and software for the product that they're providing and the services that the end users are providing, which is the healthcare workers, the home care workers, is really a fascinating conversation about where that industry is headed. And you could really probably imagine it's going to be the case for many, many other industries as well. And with that, I'd like to thank you and hope that you enjoy today's episode. So Naomi, thanks for being on. And I guess first question I'd really like to ask, I don't think I've ever asked you this, is like, how did you get into the whole tech startup scene?
Hi, Nectar, and thanks so much for having me. How I got into the tech startup scene? Well, I actually was a startup entrepreneur, but without knowing that I was a startup entrepreneur. I actually have like a master's degree in developing markets in Latin America, and I was working for IBM, working all over South America, doing lots of fun stuff. So that was really my first intro to tech, and I really enjoyed learning about tech. But then it was really after I had my first child that there was a real need that came up, and I started thinking about being more entrepreneurial. And so I had an idea in my head, and basically we moved back to Montreal, and I put that into motion. So I built a company, which at the time was called Maman Bébé Café, and it got all kinds of praise. I won all these entrepreneurship awards, and it was great fun and super empowering to see how you could take, your embryonic idea and actually, make it into something tangible, within a year. So that was awesome. And I never thought of myself as a startup entrepreneur. I just thought of myself as somebody who wanted to start a business, went to a bank to get a small business loan, and basically did it. So when people ask me, afterwards, they're like, "Oh, well, why didn't you do a raise? Why didn't, like all the terminology that comes with startup?" That just wasn't even in my vernacular at that point. But then when I sold off the company, I said, okay, I better go to work for a bit so that, to be fair to my husband. And it was my first time actually working in Montreal. So I was introduced to a company called Modelcom, who actually did financial modeling for a lot of startup companies, a lot of tech companies. And they wanted somebody to help with like the business strategy. So they asked me if I would join. And through them is really how I got to know the whole startup scene in Montreal. At the time, it was like Montreal Startup, and I met all of the great entrepreneurs. I met the VCs, and I started to really get excited about this world that was really evolving. And I was at an event. I then met an entrepreneur and looked at his technology, and I really got seduced by the technology. So I left ModelCom and I joined that startup, and that was really where I started getting into the startup world. Learned all about building SaaS platforms, and this was kind of pre-AI, but it was really AI type stuff that you would call AI today. And
Yeah, I think that's where we met, right? With Claude and Nexology, and the work that was being done was pretty cutting edge.
It was definitely, it actually still is cutting edge. So it just shows how important it is to take a really awesome technology, but you need to have a really solid business model, and you need to have a solid platform behind it for it to really take off. So those are the real challenges when it comes to building sustainable startups. So that was super exciting. And then at some point in Nexology, I felt like I was starting to look for my new challenge, and I had crossed paths with Jean-François Gagné, who was in the middle of incubating the idea of Element AI, and he asked me to join. So then went on that crazy journey for about 3 years, and learned tons of stuff, and it was really quite an amazing opportunity. And now and then was asked to be the head of the sort of R&D arm of Alayacare, which is called Alayalabs, and that's where I am today.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, I think you mentioned a few tidbits of wisdom. I want to go back to one point you brushed over about the importance of not just having good technology, but also having a business model, sustainable business model. I guess something that you learn the hard way and as an important challenge. Is there any particular experience, or is it just something that you knew from day one, considering your background? Hey, like this thing, we need to be able to sell it. We need to be able to make profits. Just curious as to how you came to that insight.
Well, I think sometimes when you have a technology that is really industry agnostic, it makes it much harder because you can use it anywhere and there's so many different use cases, but you have to choose one or two, do that really well, see if you can, be profitable there, and then kind of grow a business off of it. I think that the hard part is, saying no to opportunities that are taking you off of that path. But when you're a startup, you want to say yes to everything. But then that kind of ends up diluting a lot of your effort and your energy, and you end up kind of having little pockets of use cases that are delivering value in many different industries and for many different use cases, and it's hard to build a repeatable business model. So I think taking time to concentrate to make sure that you have the right business model that can actually repeat itself is a very important step.
Yeah, amen. And what attracted you to Alayacare? Like, obviously, I know Adrian a little bit and the team there, and it seems like you guys are just crushing it lately. So curious to hear about what attracted you to the company and the opportunity.
Well, there's a few things. One is, so in all transparency, my family, my husband, my father-in-law, had a small investment company and actually discovered Alayacare about four years ago through the Maple Leaf investors, so the angel investors in Toronto. And so we actually were invested in Alayacare. And so I always had my eye on them and, went to the first or second round closing party. And, I was always impressed with how it was run, because I felt like you'd get the emails that say, this is what we're going to do next quarter. And then they actually did it. And then the next one said, this is what we're going to do. And then they did it. So it just felt very transparent and it felt well run. And when I was at Element AI, one of the areas I really wanted to focus on was AI and health, because I felt that that was where AI could really help move the needle and help society. So it became like a really obvious choice to be able to kind of work for a company where I really respected the management team and I really liked the mission that they were on, and the home care mission, which was something I didn't know very much about before. Then I got to know very much about, and then to so the mission and the company, and then actually to take all of that amazing knowledge that I had acquired over the past, 4 years or so, in terms of advanced technologies and machine learning and predictive analytics and all that, and being able to, put it into practice in a lab to be able to actually make a really innovative product.
Yeah, it sounds like in your career, you've always had like this kind of like step ladder approach of like learn one skill and then take it to the next place where you're able to apply it, grow, and then move on. So again, I'm just projecting, but that's how kind of what it sounds like. You're able to take what you've learned and like build it to like a bigger and better and more impactful mission. I'd like to maybe dive into, like, for the people that don't know Alayacare, like I said, they are growing pretty rapidly, but maybe just talk about their mission and what the company does.
Yeah, I mean, so basically we build software for the home care industry. So this is like home care is where, for example, somebody has an operation in the hospital. Let's say they have a hip replacement, something like that, and then they have they stay in the hospital for a few days. Then they have to go home and they have to have rehab and they have to get better, but they need help. So they might hire like a home care worker to come to the house, help them do chores around the house, help them do the bathing, help them do many things that they have to do for their activities of daily living while they're rehabilitating. And where it focuses a lot is on the elderly. So, there's a lot of studies that show that the elderly do a lot better at home, sort of like aging, not just better, but actually, aging with dignity and grace. They do that much better at home than being in a long-term care facility. And of course, this is very topical these days during the pandemic. We can see some of the long-term care facilities have been exposed for some of the subpar management, and that's scary to think about putting your loved ones there. And so home care is something that's not talked about as much, but it's a very, very important undercurrent that really takes care of our elderly and more vulnerable population. So our software is used by all of the agencies, public and private agencies, who basically are like almost like workforce management agencies that have a bunch of these nurses and personal support workers that are then dispatched out to do these visits at people's homes.
Okay, so a CLSC will be a customer, for instance, of your software.
Yeah, CLSC would be definitely a refer here in Quebec. It would be a CLSC
in Quebec.
Yeah, and so it's an end-to-end software. So the software does workforce management. So it has calendaring. You see which personal support worker is going to go where at which time, and make sure they have all of the proper information with them. So that means it's all they have the information. It's accessible by web, so it's accessible on any of the devices that they take with them. So we have scheduling software, calendaring software, and then of course all of the financial information that follows from each visit. So the visits are charged, and then a lot of times they have to be reimbursed. Sometimes they're reimbursed by, in the States there could be Medicaid and Medicare. Where you could have private, where you actually are charging individuals for it. And then there's the whole part, the modules of the software that's all about the actual care that's being delivered. So each person has something like a personalized care plan. So what goals, what diagnosis do we have? What goals are associated to these diagnoses? And what are the activities of daily living that have to happen? If it's somebody who's elderly, and maybe they need a visit a few times a month, then or a few times a week, then they would come to they would be given a bath, a few times a week. They would maybe have to go for a walk. They would maybe be fed. All these type of things will be itemized. And as well, there's more skilled labor. So you'd have nurses that are actually coming to potentially, change the dressings on wounds, administer medication. So all of that is contained within the application. So all of the information, all of the workflow, and then of course all the financial information to run a profitable, if you're private, run a profitable home care agency.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't realize the scope of what you guys do, and I can imagine, like, in how many countries do you operate right now?
So we really cooperate in Canada, Australia, and the US.
Okay. Okay.
So
And
it's
yeah, go ahead.
the complexity is that each province, each state, each country, they all have their different regulations. So the software has to be flexible enough to be able to accommodate all of the different regulations for payment, for forms, for medication, all that kind of stuff for each different area. So it's incredibly complex, but if you think about it, it's like an ERP. Like it's really the software that runs these particular agencies.
Yeah. And do you expose or is it in the plan to expose the interface to the end user, let's say like parents or loved ones that are helping to take care? Or is that not really, let's say, a viable option?
Yeah, no, that's very, very topical. So we've just recently released we call it the family portal. So this is a module where the whole family can then, basically log into a portal and they can see when the visits are coming up. They can put, comments. They can see what medication is being administered. They can see what the progress is. So yes, definitely. And since COVID, we had to really scramble to quickly make virtual visits available. So make the technology available so that when the caregiver cannot come in person, they can still do virtual visits. Any type of therapies, any type of different ones. Obviously, you can't give a bath, virtually, but there's many other tasks that can be accomplished virtually, so that the visit just doesn't come to an end.
Yeah, that's very, like you said, topical. And maybe I'll share a small personal story. Like my mother-in-law recently passed away, and we decided to have her stay at home versus have her going to like a long-term care facility. She was really doing relatively okay. She was battling cancer, but she stayed at home. My wife's a nurse, so she was able to help out. And because of obviously the pandemic, like we didn't want to put her into a hospital or a centre d'hébergement. Because visiting hours would be basically almost inexistent, like an hour, a pre-planned hour a day. So like we figured it'd be not nice for a person to spend their final hours alone. And we benefited enormously from support services from the CLSC in particular, where they would basically send people to spend the night. And I was really surprised at how well it was organized. I would have imagined it being a little bit more disheveled, considering this the context. But it was super well done. We were able to get a lot of help. People that would come and help bathe her, people that would come, nurses that would come to administer medication. And I could just imagine the need for this type of care to just be growing over the next few years.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think you're probably in a fortunate situation. I think sometimes when it's quite serious, then they have to prioritize who they're going to come see and who they're going to give help to. Look, our population is not getting younger. So if you look at the baby boomers, they're 1946 to 1964. Those are the baby boomers. So, the oldest baby boomers, like in 2026, they're going to all be 80. Like that's, we're that, and that's a big chunk of the population. So I'd say that, my generation or maybe your generation, we're not really prepared to take care of that generation. And so we are going to need help to be able to do that. And by empowering these agencies to be more efficient, then we can definitely help to reach more people. And, we're seeing with COVID, of course, at the beginning of the crisis, our clients definitely saw, a hit in a lot of cancellations of visits because, they're afraid to have care workers come into the home, in fear of them, exposing them to potential infection. And we've seen in the last little while that it's starting to be, a little bit of an uptick that people, the expectation is that people are going to want to take their loved ones out of long-term care if they can, and just get, a permanent, home caregiver to be there, like 8 hours a day or whatever's needed. Not have, many circulating ones, but have them assigned. And this is going to be more of the norm. So the whole industry is kind of like, waiting for the, for the change to happen and really start to see a real uptick in business demand.
Yeah, yeah. So like, maybe it's actually very interesting. My next question was going to be, how has the apocalypse basically impacted Alayacare? I imagine there's probably an internal and external component. I'd like to hear maybe on both. The internal component is, how have you guys handled remote work? Continuing to operate, develop products, sell products with the disruption, and then secondly, from a market perspective, how have you benefited? I imagine it's more benefit, but I can imagine maybe it's hurtful to the business, but I imagine it's more of a benefit. But I'd love to hear those two angles.
Yeah. Well, internally, we're actually very fortunate. And we said that all the time, that we're fortunate that, we're a software company. So we can really work anywhere. Everybody can keep developing at home. We can keep working remotely. We can keep, and it's a SaaS product, so our customers can keep using it. So we were fortunate in terms of that. As a company, obviously, we're all working from home, and everybody had to get used to the, being remote. And some people find that, they're much more productive. Other people really prefer being in the office. So, it depends what your situation is at home. Of course, just like everybody, those that have young kids at home, it makes it really hard to work, and they have to kind of split the days with their spouses and things like that. But in general, the running of our company was not disrupted by that. We did have to, let's say, change the product roadmap a little bit to quickly put in things like screeners. So make sure that every caregiver and every patient at home is screened before a visit actually happens. So, have when a care worker is going to clock in, then before they clock in, like through their mobile, they have to, respond to the questions like, do you have a fever? Do you have, have you traveled? Have, all the questions for screening. And then if there's anything positive, like, yes, they, have a sore throat, they have a cough, they have a fever, anything like that, to quickly take them out of the schedule and, replace them with somebody else. And one of the things we had to put in was contact tracing. So if somebody is symptomatic, then we could quickly see who else they have seen and who else has seen them very quickly, so that we could then isolate that circle of care and make sure that we're not continuing to expose anybody needlessly. So those were things we had to put in right away. And the other thing that I was mentioning before was about virtual visits. So this was something that was on the roadmap, but it definitely got bumped up to be able to offer that. And I think we're going to see from now on in that there's a lot of visits that will continue to be virtual, even when it's deemed safe to continue going back.
Yeah, maybe what are your thoughts on the whole work from home forever kind of movement? Like we saw it yesterday with a bunch of the big tech companies announcing indefinite work from home. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, even if there hasn't been a policy quote unquote at Alayacare. What do you think about it?
Well, it's interesting because we did have a poll recently to see, like, as deconfinement is becoming, more kind of coming closer to reality. There was kind of a poll to see, who would want to come back to the office, and would you want to just come back a few times a week? Would you want to come back permanently? Would you want to permanently stay home? Like, just to get an idea, because our office managers want to be able to prepare. Like, if we do go back, then what percentage of people can come back? How are we going to do the configurations? All that type of stuff. And on the first poll, there was really less than 10% of the company that was like, yes, I really want to come back to the office right away. So we'll see where that goes. I know for me personally, I'm fine working at home. I find, it would be nice to, have face-to-face team meetings, especially when we're doing like strategy and brainstorming and things like that. There's definitely extra time that's, you have to take to, put stuff into a PowerPoint so that it's clear for everybody, as opposed to just talking, which is what you would do, if you were face-to-face.
Yeah.
I think we don't have a specific policy yet. And, we have kind of a town hall every Tuesday, which is something we were doing only quarterly. But when we first went, into confinement, I think everybody needed to feel connected to the company. So by having a a weekly kind of meeting with Adrian and guests and stuff like that. It kind of gives everybody a purpose to be like, hey, how are we doing? How are we being affected? What are some things we should be talking about? So, tried to make sure the communication was overly communicating so that people feel they're still part of something. Especially, we had a bunch of new people that started. I had, one that was just a few weeks old and one that, onboarded remotely. So that's tough, right? Because when you're trying to onboard new employees, they kind of just get to know the company through your lens, right? So you have to try to give them a feel for everything, but remotely. So that's tough.
Yeah, it's so important. Like, if there's one thing I've learned is like the importance of communication and repetition throughout this whole crisis. Of like, you just have to be much more transparent as to what's going on, particularly because you don't have those like in between times in the office, like the old school water cooler. I'm not sure if most people will get what a water cooler is, but like you're missing all these like serendipitous moments that happen of conversation in office. So you have to be really crisp and repetitive. Yeah. Particularly in a remote work setting. And I think you guys being a software company's office, I think you've benefited from the wave of like, the growing importance of software, particularly in your case, in healthcare, I mean. And I'd love to talk about a little bit about Alayalabs, like since you joined in September, with the focus of that R&D department, how you guys are using AI and machine learning to basically kind of like up level what you guys are doing.
Yeah, sure. So the lab is really, like I said, the R&D arm. And when I started, I kind of broke it into three groups. And one is, I think our real raison d'être is to make sure that the Alayacare platform or platforms really, are the most innovative, and that we can use new technologies to solve problems maybe faster and better. And so that's really what we want to examine. So it's, working very closely with the product team and seeing, okay, what is the vision and how can we maybe, help get there faster, or, with some rapid prototyping, what are some interesting ideas that we could be trying out with some new technologies, basically just different ways of solving problems. So that's the product side. The other one is really acting like a bit of an advisory group, because one of the beauties of, a SaaS platform is that we actually have access to, lots of aggregated and anonymized data. So we're able to, get a good pulse on where the industry is at, and we can really help our clients to be more strategic. So, we can give them benchmarking across the industry. We have some clients that are like, hey, we want to do a deep dive into this particular issue. And we can do that from a data science point of view. And, try to understand, okay, why are your churn numbers, 30% worse than the industry average, or what, just giving examples. So we can work with them that way. And then the third sort of bucket of what the labs does is really in the fundamental research. So we have one full-time professor who is on staff, and she works with us once a week. She's from Polytechnique. And we have 3 students who are actually, right now we have 4, but we have 3 students, PhD and master students who are working on different their projects, their thesis projects, but using our data and doing technology that will, help advance what we're doing. So one of them is doing kind of churn prediction models. Another one is looking at different optimization models. And another one is using NLP, looking at kind of the progress notes that are in the system to see if we can pull out intent or any meaning to give insight whether an employee might be a candidate to leave, whether we can read anything through the notes, the unstructured data that's in the system. And then right now we have a summer student as well who's doing more dashboarding type work.
Yeah, I feel like there'll be so many opportunities you guys will discover just because you're digitizing something that's an archaic analog process, but also centralizing it with all your customers globally. So I think it's going to create so many different opportunities to improve the product, but as I imagine, also monetization opportunities. So like being able to offer more products, more features that will benefit Alayacare in the long term as well.
Yeah, it's funny because it's actually quite an unsophisticated industry. So, prior to Alayacare coming along and having like a web-based SaaS, most of the software that was out there are more, on-premise type software, legacy software, and things are done even on paper. So, the biggest areas that people really need help in, or where the software has to be very efficient, is really in optimizing these processes, right? Like optimizing hiring, everything is around the actual worker, right? So it's a real supply chain. It's the supply of healthcare workers and, actually more, personal service workers and nurses, being able to have enough of them. So how many of them, where do we recruit them from? How many do we hire? We have to make sure that we can put them to work right away. They have to be put to work right away so that we can optimize, where they are, make sure the right person is at the right place at the right time. And then making sure that the back end processes are really solid, so that everybody is the information for payroll is done properly. So some of the basic stuff is really important. Like making sure the right people, right place, right time. Make sure everybody is paid what they should be paid. Make sure the claims go to the right places. All that is very important. Then being able to deliver better care is a huge focus for Alayacare. So even our motto or our logo is, better technology, better outcomes. And so, when you talk about an outcome, it depends what it is we're looking for. So it could be, the examples I gave at the beginning, the outcome is that somebody would be rehabilitated quicker. Somebody, they might have a goal that is just, somebody who's elderly, they want to be well enough to, walk their daughter down the aisle for their wedding. Those could be their particular goals. And, being able to reach those goals, that could be a positive outcome. But making sure that we have technology that is helping to, capture the data and measure the outcomes is very important. And certain industry, certain jurisdictions where we operate, that's even how the compensation happens, is based on outcomes. So you have to show that you are delivering quality service and improving outcomes to be able to keep being compensated for those services.
Yeah, you mentioned the industry, Naomi. I want to go back and zoom out and talk a little bit about the industry. So, what do you think is misunderstood or underappreciated in the healthcare industry, more globally speaking? So, another way to ask the question is, what do you think is happening that deserves more attention?
So, I've heard the expression. I'm not deep from the home care industry, but I have heard that the home care is a bit like the poor cousin of the healthcare system. So they're not really considered. They're not considered like essential workers. They're not. Some of them are unionized, but they're not. They're a bit like a peripheral service offering that doesn't get the kind of like attention and lobbying and everything that it deserves. And it's actually quite a sad commentary, I think, on our society. In Western society, we don't really, respect and honor the elderly. We more want to kind of close our eyes and put them away somewhere where we don't really have to deal with them. And, being a personal support worker is not, it's hard work, and it's not something that everybody wants to do. Because, like bathing people, feeding people, changing diapers, this is hard work, right? And it's not glamorous work. And it can also be isolating, and it can be very difficult. So, we end up having to import people to actually take care of our elderly. And there's certain countries where definitely taking care of the elderly is more of an honor. So this is something that I find kind of sad in our society, and that it's quite poorly paid, and yet it's such an important part of that demographic that everybody's going to be there one day. And we've seen this definitely in Quebec and in Ontario during this pandemic, that some of the long-term care facilities have been exposed for just general negligence. But you can see as soon as people are afraid to go to work, maybe they're afraid for their safety, or they can actually get government subsidies to not go to work, there's no motivation to go. And so people were just not showing up to work. And I know in Ontario now for, they're giving, extra dollars per hour, almost like danger pay for healthcare workers, like for nursing. And even, here in Quebec, I know they give for people who are working in grocery stores, right? They're trying to ensure that people will still perform the essential services that need to happen. But I know in Ontario, the private pay agencies, that's not part of it. So, one of our clients that we were talking to, it's really hard for him to keep his workers because now if they go work at the hospital, they're going to be getting $4 more an hour. So it's really hard to justify. And for him to keep paying higher and higher, that's really tough. So it's definitely an industry that I think needs more attention. And it's going to become more and more important as our population ages.
Yeah, it goes back to the adage of like software is eating the world, and it sounds like it's going to be eating home care as well. I think in a very positive way with the tools and services that you guys provide. Maybe a final question for you, Naomi, would be just where people could find out more about the work you guys are doing, or maybe connect with you, reach out to you individually.
Yeah, sure. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter. You can send me an email, Naomi Goldapple at Alayacare.com. And of course, you can go to our website, Alayacare.com, to find more information. Those should be many.
Cool. So I'll link those in the show notes as well. And just want to thank you. This is super cool. I mean, continue the good work you guys are doing. I just find it so nice and refreshing to hear a company that's mission is really helping people, and it's not just about dollars and cents, which doesn't hurt, but in this case it's both. It's being able to have a mission that truly provides something that's valuable. And obviously I'm a little bit biased right now just because I benefited from that help. So I feel that the work you guys are doing, and that the people that you're empowering is really it's a benefit to society.
Yeah, I agree. I think our we always have a saying that we want to provide the service that we would want our loved ones to get, and that's kind of like what drives the kind of the everyday and the mission of the company, is knowing that everybody's going to be there someday, and it's important to be able to focus on it. So yeah, cool. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you for listening to the Point of No Return podcast. Don't miss an episode by subscribing on iTunes or Google Play.